The COVID-19 Social Relief Distress Grant of 350 Rand has been brought back for unemployed people between the ages of 18 and 59 years. Human rights organization, the Black Sash, has conducted studies into how people experienced the distribution of the grants. And joining me now to talk us through the findings is Dr. Erin Torkelson. Doctor, thank you very much for your time. So talk us through those findings. What have been the experiences of people who lined up to receive this 350 Rand grant?
Thanks so much for having me. Well, what our report had showed was that actually, even though the 350 Rand grant was a great step forward and it recognized 18 to 59-year-olds who are unemployed for the first time, actually the grant was very hard to access for a lot of people. And that was because the application system was mostly digital, or because the way people's application were verified on government databases led to a high rate of rejections. So what we're looking for now, when the Tito Mbweni speaks later today, is actually that the budget is expanded so that fewer people will be excluded from this process.
Yeah. You also do say, though, that the 350 Rand grant was not linked to an objective measure of poverty. If anything, it fell well below the poverty line of 585 Rand. Might that be a suggestion that this 350 Rand is now pushed up to 585 Rand?
That's exactly right. So in the first round of the COVID-19 SRD grant, only 13 billion Rand of Cyril Ramaphosa's 500 billion Rand package was allocated toward this grant. And so when SASSA did the math, it actually only had 350 Rand per month for 6 months for 6 million people to give out. So they actually couldn't make the grant any larger because the budget allocation was so small. They also couldn't service all the people who should have qualified for it. So they had to make the eligibility criteria very, very strict.
Yeah.
So what we're looking for here is a much bigger budget that hits an objective measure of poverty. The 585 is our lowest poverty line. So that's actually only scraping by with food poverty, with enough money to buy food. 1268 is the upper bound poverty line, and that would be, wishful thinking at this stage, but that's what we're really asking for.
Yeah, look, while it is important to point out that the issue of this amount going forward is stress for the national fiscus, perhaps the major talking point here, Dr. Torkelson, has got to do with the people who are lining up and the age group, therefore, 18 to 59, at least 18 to 35, perhaps that's the band I'm looking at. Surely that's got to be a major concern for those who are in the governing seat, young people lining up for a grant as opposed to them getting out there and working so that they can earn a living. That's going to be a major stress.
Listen, recently when the latest labor force survey came out, 74% of youth in South Africa are unemployed. So that cohort that you're mentioning, it's not actually that they don't want to be out there working. It's that there simply are no jobs. So you can't hold them responsible for being lazy or for not going out to try and make something of themselves. There are no jobs. And when you have a harsh lockdown like level 5 or level 4 that we've just come up on, even the typical things people do, like hustling on the street corner for various day labor or piece jobs, is severely limited. So in a condition like the one that we're living, you actually have to look at providing grants, because those grants can form the basis of people to start small businesses or little entrepreneurial activities and hopefully grow them. You actually need money to take some sort of risk, and without that, the economy can't grow. So you can't see this as taking money from the taxpayers or taking money from the rest of the economy. Grants are actually a way to stimulate the economy.
Sure. Then let's talk about those who simply were rejected by the system. What did they depend on?
Well, part of the trouble there was that SASSA made a decision. Most of their offices were closed during lockdown. So instead of people bringing in their bank statements to show they had no income, they verified people's status of no income against other government databases. But these databases like the UIF or SARS were very out of date. We met a client who was rejected because she had an IRP-5 in SARS database from 5 years ago for R1.80, and the client was rejected on that basis. So in that case, people have to either depend on family members who during this time we know were shortening their hands, as people say, because nobody had that much money to give, or debt. The debt economies in urban and rural areas were growing during this time through informal lending or lending at spaza shops or loan sharks. And so that's not a good position for people to be in.
Yeah. Finally, Dr. Torkelson, this is almost a feedback session. You guys did this study, and these are now the findings you are talking us through. Surely you must talk about the performance of the South African Post Office, which was the key distributor of these grants. How did they do?
Well, I think we've all seen the images of long queues, people sleeping overnight because they were worried that the post office would be short. We know that the money was inconsistent, often too little in getting there and couldn't accommodate everybody who was queuing. So the Post Bank has a real problem, and we would hope that any package that was introduced also considered the fact that the distribution system has to be beefed up. It can't only rely on a failing state-owned enterprise. We've got to also think about ways of going through retailers, the banks, other possibilities so people can get their money without having to sleep on the street. It's incredibly undignified as a distribution system.
Dr. Erin Torkelson, a social protection expert, thank you very much for your time and indeed